Welcome back to the channel. Some years ago, almost 10 years ago, I hosted a podcast called SCIFI on Screen. The podcast lasted about 5+ years, and I gently closed it down in order to transition into a YouTube channel talking more about books and movies. But I reviewed films one at a time, sometimes compared originals to remakes, sometimes I did special shows. But a lot of the criticisms and a lot of the critiques and analysis that I did for these films, I stand by. And so I thought, since I've done over about 100 shows, that I would share the archives with my new audience here on my YouTube channel. The shows range from about 45 minutes or so more of a podcast. I'll just put up a static image of the old logo, and you can listen and enjoy. I'm going to do these weekly, and hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Sci-Fi on Screen. I'm your host, Jeff Palermo, and in this week's episode, we're going to close out our survey of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy by talking about the third and final film, 2012's Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight, of course, made $2 quadrillion and had incredible critical acclaim as well. It was an incredible knockout for Nolan. But it took them 4 years to get a sequel together, and they really were careful to wait until a story, what they call they cracked it, right? They really wanted to break the story and have it be, equal to what they did. I think the time spent in development was well worth it. I mean, it's another crackerjack film in the franchise. So again, it was released in 2012. Returning were nearly all of the cast of Dark Knight. There's the addition of some new cast. Joseph Gordon-Levitt joined them as Officer John Blake. Tom Hardy, of course, as Bane, and Hathaway as Selina Kyle, a.k.a. Catwoman. Matthew Modine as Deputy Commissioner Pete Foley, and Marion Cotillard as well as Miranda Tate. Chris Nolan and Jonah Nolan and David Goyer really worked on the story. I think Jonah really wrote a lot of the story with Goyer, but I know that Jonah Nolan's really the one who's given a lot of credit for the script, but all three of them worked on the story, obviously. Hans Zimmer came back to do the music. I think Zimmer did this by himself, although the more I read about Zimmer, the more I realize that Zimmer sort of has I want to say think tank, but whatever the musical version of think tank is, play tank. So a Zimmer soundtrack usually is a cooperative effect by a lot of musicians who work sort of in his shop, as it were, which he takes some criticism for, but I think it's really kind of cool, actually. So much for the backdrop, not much really more to say. Let's jump right in. And the movie opens immediately with Commissioner Gordon kind of finishing off, ending a speech about Harvey Dent. It is Harvey Dent Day, and it's the 8th annual Harvey Dent Day in Gotham City. And we see Dent's huge portraits in the background flanking Gordon. And then we quickly cut away to a swiftly moving camera over some grass. And it reminded me of the opening of Batman Begins with Bruce and Rachel running through the grass. Kind of cool. We now hear a music cue, which we'll come to know as Bane's theme. It's not unlike the Joker's theme. Obviously, the Joker's theme was more eerie. Bane's theme has a lot more propulsiveness, but it's this odd time percussion, but it also has sort of a pad sound as well. And I think it's very effective in the film. We see a group of hooded men and a scientist. The scientist's name is Dr. Pavel, are being delivered to a CIA agent who's in, they don't really tell you where they are, some country in the middle of nowhere. And the CIA agent is played by The Wire's Aidan Gillen. And if you don't know the actor's name, you know him from The Wire as Tommy Carcetti. The agent is there to pick up the scientist, but the hooded men with him weren't on the menu. And yet he hears from someone saying, listen, they worked for the masked man. And immediately now he's interested. So then we cut to the aircraft. It's in the air. Beautiful shot. I have no idea where they filmed it, but immediately we're in epic film land, just the way it's shot. Very cool. I'm going to call him Carcetti because they don't give him a name. He's CIA man. So Carcetti plays a game with the hooded men, basically telling him that the flight plan that they filed only included one of them, and the other one's, he's going to have to toss off the plane. The only one who can remain is anyone who can tell them about Bane, the masked man. So he plays this little game with them, since they're all blindfolded. Like, he brings one near the open door in the back of the plane. He shoots a gun next to the guy's ears, and then, his buddies pull the body back. he's trying to run a game on them, like he threw it out the window. But eventually Bane is unmasked and we hear his voice before we see him. And then eventually the CIA agent pulls off the thing, and there's Tom Hardy as Bane. It's just a brief aside to begin with Bane. I love the mask. Bane in the comics was kind of a knockoff of the Mexican wrestler kind of motif, right? The way he was set up. He's so much more brutal in this film, and there's no costume-ish type of affectation that he has. Like, it's just the mask is really the only thing that at all makes him kind of a villain in the superhero sense, like everything else is very realistic. And I love the voice. I love what Tom Hardy does with his voice. Now, definitely Nolan placed the voice in a very strange place in the film's mix. And I thought I was at when I went to see his first run in a movie theater, I thought the theater sound system sucked. But then when I got the DVD, the Blu-ray, and I played it, and I thought, it's not the theater. And then I read enough about it where it was a common complaint that Bane's voice is so up in the mix, and it's isolated too from the surrounding noise in such a way. Let's face it, it's larger than life, right? I definitely understand why people have problems with it, and I would never argue for it, but I really like it, and I don't mind it so much. I think I would prefer if it were melded into the sonic tapestry a little better, but there's something about already how they're shooting Bane. The voice is almost bigger than the soundtrack. He's shot very large in the frame all the time. He's shot from a lot of low angles, and I think the filmmakers were like, Bane is like Godzilla in this movie. I get it, and I really like what they do with him. Obviously Heath Ledger's performance in Dark Knight, how are you possibly going to come after that, But I think they made a great choice in the Joker being a cackling, unpredictable, flamboyant villain to an incredibly brutal, larger-than-life, calculating, forward-moving man as Bane. With this, English accent, which kind of gives it another chilling aspect of it, like he's not that Batman almost has the more mannish, brutalist voice, where Bane has this voice, yes, he's got such an English accent, with all this other brutalism around him. And I don't know how they did it, but it works. So anyway, it's all really good, and I love Bane's entrance into this movie, and I love all the scenes that he's in. So now there's this incredible scene where, I think Nolan shot all these early scenes in IMAX, and I don't know whether it's how much of this film is shot in IMAX, but there are certain times when I'm watching this film when the image is so incredibly crisp and rich, and this opening sequence is part of it. Like it's beautifully filmed, really lovingly shot. And, so basically we know this sequence, right? Bane's men jump into the plane. They kill most of the guys and the CIA man, and they put Dr. Pavel's blood in a cadaver, or like a blood bag next to a cadaver. The plane is then winched up, halfway up towards the C-130 cargo plane, which is towing it. The wings rip off. Bane leaves behind one of his followers to die for the cause. And, there's this great line, "The fire rises, my brother," And this is a great scene where he and Dr. Pavel, he presses some detonator button, and the plane around them sort of falls away towards the ground. It's almost like, it reminded me cinematically of when, the shots of some of the Saturn V rocket booster ejection scenes, like when NASA filmed the boosters letting go. The fuselage, when it drops, kind of reminded me of that. It's a really cool, vertiginous scene. And some great shots even, too, of Bane. There's kind of a vertical fight on the plane between Bane's men and the CIA guys. And, Bane's dropping down from seats, and it's shot from underneath. And just looks, it just looks really cool. And it's a dazzling sequence all around. Very minimal CGI is used. I mean, they filmed a lot of that stuff, a lot of stunts, real planes for the most part. I even did a little Googling about, what was what, and no one really knows, I mean, you can kind of tell at the very end when Bane is being reeled in towards the C-130 with Dr. Pavel, looks a little fake. I can't imagine that they would do a take where they would actually film a plane's wings being ripped off, being the unstable nature of such an event. So this is probably CGI in there, but so much of it is real that it's such a pleasure to watch, and it's a hell of an opening scene. So now we get kind of a mournful soundtrack cue, and we return to Gotham City, where we get the opening montage to kind of catch us up about where we've been since The Dark Knight. Again, it's Harvey Dent Day in Gotham. It's later that evening. Gordon has already given his speech. There's a vigil at Wayne Manor for Dent. The mayor is speaking about the Dent Act and about the 1,000 inmates that are locked up in Blackgate Prison. And we see young Selina Kyle, played by Anne Hathaway, making the rounds as a server. Gordon is then about to give a speech about Harvey Dent. He pulls out a piece of paper and he's muttering something about the truth about Harvey. Maybe not, it's not the time, and so he puts the piece of paper back in his jacket, and it will become a story point later on. So we as viewers are now definitely told that Dent did die 8 years ago because it's a little vague. I think they kept their window open at the end of that film. But so, yes, he is in fact dead. And then we move into the kitchens of Wayne Manor. We have Alfred, bossing the staff around. We hear some rumor mongering from some of the staff that, Bruce Wayne hasn't been seen in years and he's a recluse and they're, don't know what he looks like. And so Selina is directed to bring a single tray of food to a certain room in the back of the mansion. And she's given a key by Alfred and the food, and she delivers it. And they shoot really beautiful. Wherever this mansion or wherever this place is that they scouted, it's beautiful inside. And these beautiful staircases and these big rooms. I mean, it really, really is wonderful. So Selina enters the room, leaves the food. Then we cut away briefly and we meet Miranda Tate, who's on the board of directors of Wayne Enterprises, as is John Daggett, who is head of a company trying to take control of Wayne Enterprises. And of course, Daggett is immediately cast as a douchebag and Miranda Tate as sort of a good, a protagonist in the film. We then cut outside to another, the Christopher Nolan, I should say, loves his 80s actors, right? In Dark Knight, we had Eric Roberts. In Inception, we had Tom Berenger. And now we're getting Matthew Modine, who plays Deputy Commissioner Pete Foley. And a congressman he's talking to, and they're talking about Commissioner Gordon. That Gordon's still kind of a wartime commissioner, and he's never really relaxed, even though there's virtually no crime in Gotham City at this point because of what him and Dent and Batman had done 8 years earlier. But we hear that his wife has left him, taken the child, and that the mayor is planning to fire him in the following year to bring someone else on. Probably going to be Foley, I would think. Foley is kind of cast as the climber. We cut back to Wayne Manor and Selina Kyle sort of lingering, the room where she's delivered the food, and she's standing next to a archery target, and immediately an arrow lands in the middle of it, and she is startled half to death, and it's Bruce Wayne. We see the emergence of Christian Bale as an aging Bruce Wayne. He's got a cane and a limp, and he's wearing this sort of Van Dyke-ish beard, as it were. And he can already see that she's wearing the pearl necklace that was his mother's when he was killed as a child. And he walks over to the safe, finds that she has cracked it. He's not very alarmed. He's kind of more intrigued by her. He sort of states that, I can't let you leave with those. And she easily kicks his cane out from under him, and he drops, and off she goes out the window. And we next see her walking out, pulling pieces of her costume off, and all that's left is like a little black dress. So it kind of looks like she belongs at the party, plus the pearls. She gets into a car with the congressman that we had seen earlier talking to Deputy Commissioner Foley, and they pull away. So after the party now, we get some talk between Alfred and Bruce, and Alfred's telling Bruce about Miranda Tate and, that she wanted to see Bruce, and Bruce said no, and Alfred sort of like, she's beautiful, Bruce, wanting them to connect. Bruce is then realizing that, Selina was not there for the necklace, but for his fingerprints. We also learned there's a tracking device embedded inside the necklace in case it ever got stolen. Next, we cut to the top of Gotham Police Department. Gordon is standing next to a rusted out bat signal, which we saw him destroy at the end of the last film, looking at a case file. And Officer John Blake approaches, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. There's a little bit of talk that, in the ensuing 8 years, the Dent Act, Blake has this great lines like, when you cleaned up the streets, you cleaned them good. That Gotham has been virtually crime-free, of organized crime for the most part, and a very safe place. The next morning, Alfred finds Bruce in the Batcave, which is accessed by a similar way. They hit buttons on the piano and they go down the elevator. And Wayne has been researching Selina Kyle, finds out that she is a jewel thief with an amazing record, but that now he quotes it as the walls are closing in on her. And now we get where Alfred is with Bruce, and Alfred is scolding Bruce for not moving on when Rachel died. And Bruce is telling Alfred there's nothing for him out there in the world. Whatever was there for him died. And Alfred, is coming at him and telling him, you have to move on. This is what life's about. You got to get back out there and live. And he's intimating that what Bruce really wants is for things to go to hell again so he can go out in one last blaze of glory and actually fail, which is an interesting notion, I think. I kind of like it. And then we get what I don't like with any half-conscious cinema goer who recognizes as a tease to the end of the film. Alfred's kind of sad, and he says, I never wanted you to come back to Gotham. I always knew that there was nothing for you here but pain and misery. And I have this fantasy, every year I go to Florence and I sit in a cafe, and I have this fantasy that when you're away, that I went there one year and I saw you across the cafe and you were sitting there with a wife and maybe some children, and you looked at me and I looked at you and we smiled at each other but didn't say anything. But I knew that you'd made it and that you were happy, right? And immediately when I saw this, I was like, so that's how this movie's going to end. So now we've been reintroduced to the players. Now really the story kind of gets going. And we're with Officer John Blake, and he finds a dead young boy at the outflow of one of Gotham's sewer systems. Blake knows him from a boys' home, and he calls it St. Swithin's. It's a very odd name. He immediately goes to visit the boys' home, discovers that they've had to reduce the age at which kids can stay there because it's running out of money. There's this talk about, doesn't the Wayne Foundation fully fund the school? The guy who runs it says, no, we haven't had money from them for years. And the boy's aged out. Blake goes to talk to the boy's brother, and we hear about these rumors of kids who age out go and find work in the city underground, literally underground in the sewers, and there's rumors there's work to be found and work to be done there. I have to say, I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt a lot in this movie. I think he's one of the main reasons that I really like this film in that, we know all the major players in this film, right? We know Gordon, we know Wayne, we know Fox, we know the swirling players of the Batman films. But to me, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's the first actor in these films that looks like a real cop. Like, to me, Gary Oldman, I love Gary Oldman, right? But, he doesn't look like a cop. They made him up to look like, the comic book version of Commissioner Gordon. But Joseph Gordon-Levitt as John Blake, to me, has there's something about him that gives this film gravity. And I like that a lot of it is centered around him because, to me, he really does feel like a cop. He just feels like a guy from the street. I like the accent he uses. And he's a really good actor. And he gets some really good scenes. Some of them are here. One of them's coming up fairly soon. But I'm really a fan of his work in this movie, and I kind of have him on my list to see more of his work because I think he's terrific. Next, we cut to a evening in Gotham City at a bar, and Selina Kyle enters with the congressman she had left with, and I guess it's later the next evening, and he's in a Hawaiian shirt. I guess they've had an all-night bender or all-day bender, as it were. He's drunk sitting at the bar. So she attempts to sell the prints that she got, and she's selling them to this odd-looking man played by this actor named Bern Gorman. Really creepy-looking dude. Made me think of a weird, aged-out Pee Wee Herman. I don't know the actor's name, but really creepy looking dude. So I like him. I like his face. The deal goes south, but Catwoman has been very savvy and arranged for backup in the form of the police, as she has given a cell phone to this guy to call a friend of hers to get the last thumbprint, and actually it was the congressman's phone, so the cops are on the way. And I love Hathaway in the scene. She's amazing. First, she comes in as a commanding. She changes her voice very subtly in a lot of the different things that she does. When she's Catwoman, she's got a very, very, it's very confident and sly and almost playful. Then she kind of feigns being busted by this guy and thinking she was going to get away with getting payment, basically, because they want to kill her. So she's kind of she puts on that she's shy. And then when it all goes to hell, she jumps into action and she's so waifish, Anne Hathaway, and I'm not a big fan of waifish women, but there's something about the way she really commits to this stuff that makes me really believe that she is doing what she's doing in this film. They give her an action style, which is more about her using her body as a leverage to take guys down and to twist ankles and wrists. And so I kind of buy it. It's kind of cool. And I really like watching her. Plus, I think she's incredibly attractive, so I'm a little biased. Then she does this thing where when the cops come in, she changes yet again, and she screams as if she's some freaked out innocent bystander. And then when she realizes she doesn't have to do it anymore, she stops on a dime and turns around. So it's like a little tour de force moment for her in this scene. I really think she's amazing. So she gets out of there, but the police arrive, and Blake is there, and Gordon is there because the congressman was reported missing, and the police have basically nothing to do these days, so missing congressman is a huge deal. And so there's a huge firefight. Bane's men are retreating down the alley. The police are pushing them back. Eventually, Gordon realizes that they escaped down one of the sewers, and Gordon heads down with 3 or 4 guys. There's an explosion that takes place behind him after he's already in the sewers, and he's kind of incapacitated, taken by Bane's men. And above, Pete Foley is there with Blake, and they think it's a gas explosion, so they don't want to go down there, and they want the Department of Water and Power guy to come. And it reminded me of a scene in Die Hard when Hans Gruber's master plan is for the FBI to take out the entire grid, and that will trigger this last alarm on the safe they're trying to get through. There's a guy right there saying, "Hey, I don't have to lose the grid. I can do it from right here," and no one listens to him. And I feel like Blake reminded me of that, where he's saying, "It's a sewer line. There's no gas down there. What are you guys talking about? We should just go down there." And everyone's like, nah, we got to call the Department of Water and Power. Nobody knows what's down there. It's kind of funny, actually. Then Blake kind of realizing that it's possible that if Gordon gets killed or incapacitated, he may end up where his little buddy did in the outflow, and so he takes off. And in this moment, Matthew Modine kind of now steps into Gordon's shoes, and he's sort of the callow deputy commissioner, like he's kind of an idiot. He's really not very bright, and he kind of runs around with his head up his butt for most of the movie, making one mistake after another, and this is where it begins. So now we're with Gordon as he's taken to Bane, and we see underneath Gotham, there are men drilling and doing all kinds of construction work. Who the hell knows why? We come upon Bane, he's squatting in the corner, and his back is just awesome. Like, it's all weird and muscled, and it looks like it's possible his spine has been messed up, but turns around and it pulls a Darth Vader on one of his henchmen because he chides them for idiots to bring Gordon down to see all this. Gordon's seen everything, basically. So he kills one of the guys that has Gordon, and then the other one, he's like, "Search Gordon, then I will kill you." It's a very, very sinister moment of how ruthless Bane is and how uncaring he is about anyone matching him in like any possible way. And the filmmakers do this thing where they shoot Bane from like waist level. And again, this is the first shot we have of Tom Hardy shirtless, and he's not cut up like a movie star. Like, he looks beefy and brutal. I got to imagine that was done on purpose. And they didn't want him with this pretty little cut up muscle builder's body, but just a beefy, brutal body. And it's really cool. And the way they shoot it, like you're there at waist level with him as he finds Gordon's speech papers. And I don't know, this whole scene, I'm really afraid of Bane in this moment, when they're doing this scene. It's really cool. Gordon, in a moment of distraction, jumps into the spillway, and a bunch of people shoot after him, but he escapes. We hear Bane talking to his henchman about where the water turns out. The second guy who he was about to kill, they put a tracker on him. Bane shoots him, and they throw him in the spillway after Gordon. However, Blake has already rescued Gordon and gotten him to a hospital. So, Gordon escapes. So then we're back at Wayne Manor. Officer Blake visits Bruce Wayne in a really simple, subdued scene, which Joseph Gordon-Levitt really nails. He tells Bruce Wayne that he knows he's Batman. They do it in a way that I completely buy, because they give Gordon-Levitt a long, uncut scene where he explains it from very similar backgrounds. The way he lays it out about, when Bruce came to visit him when he was a kid, and something about the way Bruce looked was, or he recognized a look or a way that he held himself that he himself also felt extremely intently, and in that moment, like, he knew exactly who he was. And I buy it. I don't really think it's a stretch. And the great thing is, Wayne doesn't confirm or deny. He just lets it lie, which is kind of cool. But what information is given to Wayne, which is critical, is that the Boys Fund money has dried up as well about Bane, building and doing things underneath Gotham, and that Gordon is in the hospital. Blake leaves. It's pretty much now the tipping point for Bruce Wayne. He is done hiding. And he heads back down to the Batcave, and we get a brief info dump about Bane. It's the first time Wayne has heard of him. Alfred has done some digging, and he was behind this coup in West Africa that secured mining rights for John Daggett's company. And now they think that Daggett has brought him here for some reason of Daggett's. We also hear from Alfred that the boys' home funds have dried up because Wayne Enterprises is broke. And we get this notion that some project that went south in Wayne's company that kept them from, being any kind of a force in these past few years. But we don't know much more about that at the moment. Bruce wants an appointment at the hospital to get his leg checked out, and he tells Alfred to make it at the same hospital that Gordon is in. And then we briefly cut to a scene, and this is a great scene, where a doctor has done a bunch of x-rays, and he's basically given this horrible news, like, you have no cartilage in your knees, you're scarring on your kidneys, your body is a complete mess. I strongly urge you not to go heli skiing, which is, supposedly why he went there. But, where the audience has shown that this is not a young man anymore, that he is in banged up shape and not really in any kind of shape to be a superhero. So, but he's still got enough juice in him. He puts on a black mask and jumps out of the window where he was examined down to a lower area, and he sneaks into Gordon's room with the black mask on, and they have this discussion briefly, Batman and Gordon. And Gordon, when he saw Bane, he's like, "We need the Batman back." Bruce is like, "Well, what if he doesn't exist anymore?" And Gordon's like, "He has to." And then we cut away. Via the tracking device on the pearls, Wayne follows Selina Kyle to a masquerade charity ball hosted by Miranda Tate. Of course, he doesn't know it's hosted by Tate, and she approaches him, and he makes kind of a gaffe. She kind of upbraids him for it. We hear for the first time about an energy project that Wayne Enterprises heavily invested in, that Bruce shuttered and somehow failed to produce profits. That Miranda Tate knows a little bit more about him than he may think. She seems pretty savvy about what he's hiding, but she won't say more. And so then he cuts into a dance with Selina Kyle, which made me think of Batman Returns, the Michael Keaton Batman, where him and Catwoman have this incredible dance where they both understand who each other is. Of course, that doesn't happen in this film, but having Selina Kyle wear a mask that echoes sort of Eartha Kitt's Catwoman mask, like, there's no doubt that they're throwing a few sops to the fans. She's looking, rather Catwomanish in her mask. She's kind of pissed that he found her and they're dancing and he takes the necklace back, and then she's kind of giving it to Wayne about the rich and him being rich. She delivers this pretty heavy-duty line, which is a really cool line, and it's, I quote, "You're all going to wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us," end quote. I have a hard time with a film that has, the 99 percenters on its mind when it's made by billionaires, Like Hollywood films made by these guys who are the 1% of globally, playing around with these concepts. It's art, right? And it's a free world. You can say and do what you want, but it strikes me as a little hollow. Anyway, that's my little piece on that. But it's a foreshadowing of what's to come, which is pretty incredible when it does happen. And there's a nice reversal. He gets the pearls back, but she gives him a kiss and lifts his valet ticket. So when he comes back out, the valet is like, "Oh, sir, your wife took your car." And we get a shot of her speeding away. Then Alfred has to come pick him up. And, Alfred's sort of like, "Don't worry, Master Bruce. The first time is always the difficult one," thinking that he struck out and so on and so forth. It's kind of a fun scene. So now Wayne, the next day, goes to visit Fox, his armorer, as is, sort of the archetypical characters. We get more about the energy plot, that he's asking Fox why they don't give money to the boys' home. And Fox is like, "Well, we don't have any money to give. When you throw your entire RD budget into a fusion project, which then you close down, what's the company supposed to do?" And we hear that John Daggett really is hungry for Wayne Enterprises. Why, I don't know, since they seem to be a struggling company. But without Bruce to, turn on the fusion reactor, make energy, make a profit, they're in trouble with him taking over his company. And there's a funny moment when Bruce is like, "All right, thanks," and he goes to leave, and Fox is like, "This is the point of the conversation that is usually followed by an unusual request." And Bruce is like, "Well, I'm retired." And Fox is like, "Well, how about you checking out a few things for old time's sake?" And so it's kind of cool. And he brings him into the armory. And what we come to understand is that there were other prototypes all around the country, possibly around the world. And what Fox has been doing in the past years is to be gathering all of them up. Since Applied Sciences was never really made public. Now they've all been gathered into this one large place in Wayne Enterprises called the Armory, basically. Then we're introduced to the one piece of equipment that's new, and the camera is sitting where the actual piece of equipment is. It's looking at Fox and Bruce, so we don't see what it is. We do hear Fox talk about, urban environments and flying and close order flying, and it has a long name. We simply call it the Bat. Then something about a broken autopilot, which would take, Wayne's interest and maybe intellect to fix, which will definitely have, ramifications later, but they leave it for the moment. Back at the Batcave, we see Bruce strapping on this little exoskeleton for one of the leg that has no cartilage. He kicks a little brick wall with it and realizes that it actually works well and helps him to stand and to be strong. Then we're given more information about Bane from Alfred. And then he tells us that in a more ancient part of the world, this man was born inside this prison where men go to die. And of course, the Nolans with their thematic on-the-nose lines, like sometimes the pit sends something back, and that something is Bane, blah, blah, blah. We also found out that he was trained by Ra's al Ghul, which is new, and part of the League of Shadows, but excommunicated. So then we get more of Alfred telling Bruce, look, use your money and your influence and your wealth. Give this technology to the cops. Help them as Bruce Wayne. Your career as Batman is over. Again, he's like, and Bruce's like, you're afraid that I'm going to go out there and fail? And Alfred's like, no, I'm afraid you want to. Because in a way, Alfred thinks that he's just waiting around to find a really good way to die because he's never really gotten over Rachel. So now we get the stock exchange incident, I'll say, and the subsequent wheeled chase that comes. Where it looks like they filmed this too at the stock exchange downtown. I don't know if it's true, but boy, it really looks like they did. So, maybe I'll actually do some research next time I do a podcast. But anyway, in my podcast, I feel like information is so readily available that you can just click on Wikipedia for 2 seconds, and that's not the purpose of these things anyway. So Bane's men, it's another, 1%. He's definitely the Occupy movement, I think, at this time was going on. And there's all kinds of sops to them in that Bane's men are all masquerading as service workers. So one guy's a shoe shine guy, the other guy's pushing a mop. Definitely a little meta there of, the rise up of the, working classes, if you were. Bane's masquerading as a delivery service. So he walks in, and there's this brief fight that he has at the metal detectors. It's brutal, man, and he moves so fast. There's something about how they shot it and how he moves that's so incredibly brutal. It really takes my breath away each time. I'm just like, my God. And they shoot him from a low angle, and he just fills the screen. Bane is awesome in this film, and not in the cheeky way that I'll usually use awesome, but he truly is awesome. So they bust in and kill a few people and basically use some credentials from one trader to upload some kind of program of theirs. Who knows what they're going to do with it. But the gunshots bring the police who gather around. Pete Foley is there, and they have hostages. We have to wait, and John Blake is there. And Blake sees a construction truck, like cement truck, and it seems out of place to him. And he asks the guy to move, and of course, down... If you don't know this, if you don't live in New York City, they have designed downtown in and around the Trade Center and the Stock Exchange that if there's any, what you see in the film, I think actually does exist. I don't know whether they actually triggered it for the film or whether they reproduced it, but there are these barricades that will go up that literally will lock in cars from going anywhere in like a, however many block radius. And so they do that, which is kind of cool. At one point, Bane and his men burst out of the stock exchange on motorcycles, and they have hostages in the back of the motorcycles, which prevents the police from firing on them. And the first part of the chase, we're in some lower roadway where there are lights, on the ceiling. We center back and forth on these two policemen, older cop and young rookie. The lights go out, and all of a sudden we see in the dark roaring past that car, Batman on the Bat Pod. The older cop starts laughing and he goes, "Oh boy, kid, it's your lucky night. You're in for quite a show." It's a direct take from Batman Dark Knight Returns, the graphic novel, if anyone has ever read it. It's a great scene, the beginning of it, when exactly that happens. He's been gone for years, I think over like 10 years or something in the book. And he comes back, and the young cop's like, "Let's stay out of the way, kid. You're in for a show." So it was really great. I really got a kick out of that. Batman's doing his thing, and he's snatching people off of bikes, and the cops are taking down the robbers with his help. But as soon as the information is out, widespread, that he is out, Pete Foley now says, "Ignore the robbers," and he has this line where he's like, "I'm going to do what Jim Gordon never could. I'm going to capture the Batman." And he's, he's an idiot, and he's supposed to be, so whatevs. So during this, Catwoman is at John Daggett's penthouse, breaking into his safe, trying to find what was promised her for getting Bruce Wayne's prints. The safe is empty. She confronts Daggett, and what we hear about is that Daggett promised her this program called the Clean Slate. And what it's supposed to do is, if you want to erase your entire identity from the digital world, you plug it into you type in your social security number and your name. You press enter, and within a short period of time, every trace of you and the world's digital media has disappeared. Pretty cool concept. Daggett, even with her high heels on his neck, is pretty honest, and he says, we heard about it. We bought the company who claimed to have made it, and found out that it was nothing there when we bought them. And we'll find out a little later on, what happened to it, but not at the moment. So we cut back, and they chase Batman. Actually, when he finds the last robber, and he picks up the device that they were using to upload some kind of program, it has completed itself. He takes it, and of course the cops are converging. He does this nice thing where he blows up a car on a car carrier and jumps up onto a freeway. But basically they corner him, and he roars into an alley. The cops converge. Pete Foley gets out. He's like, "What did I tell you, gentlemen? Like a rat in a trap." He's just bad. Not even good idiotic dialogue. He's an idiot. And then we see the first viewing of the Bat as it roars out of the alley, and it's this flying hovercraft / helicopter. Really cool looking. It's like two Apache helicopters slammed together, the rotors underneath. And it makes a really great sound. Like, it doesn't sound like a helicopter, which is cool. It's just like this roaring sound. It comes out and blows past the cops. And, it's a funny moment, right? They don't have a chance. And John Blake, who's with Foley the whole time, and he's the conscience of the audience, right? He's like, "You think it was him, sir?" Catwoman is now surrounded by Daggett's men. She's threatening to kill him if the men don't back off. And then we hear Batman's voice come out of nowhere. They're not bluffing. They don't really care. And so Batman and Catwoman now fight together and beat off a group of Bane's minions who, we don't know if they're Daggett's people or Bane's people. They knock most of them down, and there's this moment where she's going to use a gun, and he knocks it out of her hand. No guns, and she says, "Where's the fun in that?" It's kind of cute. And then some of Bane's men from a higher perch open up, and they both flee the scene and jump into the Bat, which is waiting kind of just below the roof. And they give Catwoman a nice line. "My mother never said get in strange cars with boys." And he's like, "This is not a car." He drops her on a nearby roof, and they talk briefly. She tells him about her deal with Daggett and the clean slate, and it seems like Batman knows something about that, and he wants to find Bane, and she's like, "I'll think about it." And there's a funny bit here where the police helicopter roars overhead, and Batman turns to look at it. He turns back, and she's vanished, like what he does to people, and he's like, "So that's what that feels like." It's pretty funny. So now we're back at Wayne Manor in the Batcave. We are at the departure of Alfred from this film, for the most part. And the entrance of what I like to think of as sort of the Rocky III through line of this movie, since now, Nolan has tipped his hat in that he is an 80s movie guy, all right, whatever kind of a filmmaker he is. He has a little bit of a love for 80s action filmmaking in his soul. My personal theory is that the Bane-Batman battles, both of them, are very similar to the Rocky Clubber Lang battles in Rocky III. And I'll get more into that as we go. This starts here where they're looking at Bane fighting in the stock exchange, and Alfred is chiding Bruce, like, "Look at his ferocity, look at his power. How could you hope to match that?" And it reminded me of the scene in Rocky III where Rocky's giving a speech and Clubber shows up and insults Adrian. Mickey won't give him the fight, and they start arguing, and then Mickey has these great lines like, "He'll kill you to death inside of 3 rounds. He'll knock you to tomorrow, Rock." Mickey's convinced that Rocky cannot beat Clubber, that he's hungry, he's a wrecking machine, that Rocky hasn't been hungry since he won the belt, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like it's a very similar vibe here with Alfred. Like, you can't beat this guy, Bruce Wayne, the city needs Bruce Wayne to help fight this guy, but you, Batman, cannot beat Bane. So basically, Bruce isn't listening. Now Alfred is going to play all his cards. He says, Bruce wants him to deliver the software that he recovered from the robbers, was basically massive amounts of trades that were placed. They're not sure what the trades were about, but his fingerprints were all over it. So he needs Alfred to give this to Fox to be decoded. And Alfred says, "I'll give this to Fox, and then I'm done. I'm leaving." And his whole spiel is that I can't stand by and watch you. And again, this is Mickey, right? This is Mickey, like, if you want to face this guy, you're going to do it by yourself. And he has to basically beg Mickey to train him one last time. Mickey does, and we know the rest. But this is Alfred saying, I can't watch you throw your life away. This is, you're not living, you're not moving on, and now you want to go up against this guy who's going to knock your block off. I can't stick around and watch you. And he tells him about the letter that Rachel wrote in a last-ditch attempt to get this man, out of his head, up his ass, what Alfred thinks. And so he kind of starts off coyly saying it, but then he pretty much admits it, that, there was a letter that was burnt at the time of her death because I wanted to protect you. But in the letter, it was written that she chose Harvey over you. And Bruce is shattered. And for Bruce, it irrevocably severs their relationship. He can't believe, number one, that Alfred has done this to him. And number two, that he's doing it to him now to try to use that letter, use that information to get him to finally break off. And what he can't see that Alfred's doing it out of love. He thinks that he doesn't, he doesn't know what to think. Alfred leaves, and, all of the information is there to kind of make that work, but to me, it never really works. The whole Alfred on him thing, Alfred's kind of like a praying nanny in most of this. We don't see enough of Bruce suffering. Look, it's a Batman movie, right? We're coming here to see Batman. We're not going to have too much sympathy for a guy who's telling Bruce not to be Batman. I mean, let's face it. You're really going to have to show how that's going to hurt the city, hurt him, hurt everybody, and they don't do it. It's more implied, and I think it's kind of, the Nolans, unfortunately, can do false drama at times, and I think this is one of them. Alfred really has no place in the story. They don't want him to die from Bane's hands because they don't want this to be necessarily about revenge, so they concoct this story that he has to leave. I don't really buy it, but, the film has a lot more going for it, so it's okay. So the next morning, Fox arrives at Wayne Manor. It's kind of a funny scene because Bruce has to answer the door, letting us know, the audience, that Alfred is in fact. We learned from Fox that the stock exchange robbery was a front for that program to be uploaded, which pretty much bankrupted Wayne Enterprises. Well, bankrupted Bruce Wayne by all these fraudulent stock trades. And Fox says, look, over time, we can probably tease all this out and figure it out. But for now, you are officially broke, and your seat on the board is forfeit, and he's basically completely broke. His company is about to now be taken over by Daggett, but Fox assures him that Applied Sciences is in the black, that no one knows about it, and that even if Daggett took over the company, that, they'd never find the armory. But Daggett does know about the energy project. The notion in the film is that Miranda Tate, they have to get Miranda to somehow maneuver her into becoming head of the board, so she continues to sit on the energy project and not turn it on, because if Daggett takes control of the board, he'll exploit the energy project. And Bruce fears that this guy Pavel is known, Dr. Pavel, the guy that Bane captured. We hear early on in the film that, he published a paper on how to weaponize a fusion reactor. As soon as that happened, Bruce shuttered the project. So now we cut to the boardroom, and Wayne is summarily kicked out of Wayne Enterprises, and he is done. He comes outside, the car's towed, but, Officer John Blake is there to give him a ride. In the meantime, Miranda Tate has taken control of the board from John Daggett. Daggett's furious, and then we get the death of Daggett here back at Daggett's penthouse. Bane is there, and he confronts Daggett. Daggett goes right at Bane, like, I've paid you half a fortune. And Bane's like, you think this gives you power over me? And there's this scene where Daggett's buddy, that strange-faced dude who was with Catwoman earlier, Bane says, leave us, and Daggett's like, no, stay. Bane puts his hand on Daggett's shoulder, like an open hand. Looks at the other guy who turns around and bails. Then there's so much in that open hand of I don't know, it's such a great, I don't know who came up with it, whether it was the actor or the director, but there's such an implied sense of menace in that hand. This simple open hand on his shoulder. And it's a really cool moment. It's ruined because they give Daggett these dumb lines, like Bane is basically going to crush Daggett's skull, right? And he begins to kill him, and he's looking up at him, and Daggett's going, you're pure evil. And he says it in such a way that's really goofy. And Bane has a kind of a cool line that says, I'm Gotham's reckoning, which is kind of cool, but Daggett's histrionics kind of ruin what I think would have been a very chilly and cool scene. So that's that. So now we see in the hospital, we join Gordon, who's with Deputy Commissioner Foley. And John Blake kind of walks in, kind of goes over his boss's head, and he talks to Gordon about what's going on underneath and, so on and so forth. And so, Gordon tells Foley, look, every available cop needs to head underground to find this man. He's like, but not you, Blake. He's like, I want you to I want you to follow the other leads that he's found. So, Blake, of course, will not be stuck when the time comes. Then we have the Bruce Wayne Miranda Tate quasi love story. It's raining at night, and Bruce is home. He can't get in. He doesn't have a key. Miranda Tate is there. They both break into the window and they make this fire. Bruce finally gets a little. Been 8 years, and so he and Miranda Tate make love, and they're in front of the fire. And they have a brief conversation. He sees that she has a scar on her. Then we cut again later where she's sleeping and he leaves for his date with Bane. And there's something in this too. There's something about the music cue, about Bruce bottoming out. Like, he is kind of on a bad trajectory. Like, in a sense, Alfred is right. He's all screwed up over Rachel. He's been given, like, really, in a sense, Alfred has invalidated the past 8 years of his life. His body's all banged up. He's broke. He had to bust into his house, which he still kept, right? He still has his house, but he's losing everything, kind of. And I don't know. Like, I don't think it shouldn't have affected me this deeply, but it kind of did. Him and Miranda together, and she wants to take him away on her plane, and he's not ready. And now we cut to the subway, and basically Catwoman meets Batman, and she leads him down, and they basically fight some of Bane's henchmen in kind of a needless action sequence. I don't know that you really needed more punching and kicking from them. But so she leads him to this one place, and a portcullis kind of slams down, and he's trapped. Bane standing at the other end of this catwalk. I forget the dialogue, but Bane says, we won't stand on ceremony here, Mr. Wayne. And Catwoman's still in audio range, so she hears that and knows now that Bruce Wayne is Batman. And she's pretty much betrayed him. She's pretty much given him over. Although, truth be told, Batman did want to find Bane, but the way he was brought to Bane, he's been kind of tricked. She kind of, tricked him. So now we have Batman versus Bane #1. They get right to it. It's really cool. This is the first time in a Nolan film where you really see the fight. They really stay with the fight, and Batman is really taking it to Bane, but the camera stays behind Bane most of the time in this first onslaught. The way they have Hardy react is that Batman's most powerful blows are only making Bane kind of back up a little bit or react a little bit. Bane's not even really protecting himself. And there's this great line that he has, victory has defeated you, and he just, there's nothing behind the punches. And Bane is just kind of basically laughing it all off. And it's kind of amazing. And at one point, Bane throws him off the catwalk and jumps down. And now they're fighting on the ground. Bane will not be stopped. And there's this one great move that Bane does where he spins completely around in midair and then punches down and just knocks Batman back on his ass. Batman, realizing that nothing's working on Bane, as Bane is approaching him, throws up these sort of little explosive devices that explode around Bane's head. And Bane goes, "Theatricality and deception are powerful agents to the uninitiated, but we are not uninitiated, are we, Mr. Wayne, member of the League of Shadows?" So, it doesn't work. Then Bruce kills the lights, and Bane's like, "Oh," and I'm going to quote this whole piece because I think it's a great little paragraph. Quote, "You think darkness is your ally. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man. By then, it was nothing to me but blinding. The shadows betray you because they belong to me." Just great comic book pulp, man. I mean, come on. You can't beat that. And at the last line, he basically takes Bruce down for the last time. Bruce is behind him, and Bane totally knows it. He breaks open his cowl with his bare fist. He punches him in the cowl like 3 or 4 times and cracks it open. And so basically, Batman is down. So he backs off and doesn't go in for the kill yet, and he takes out a detonator. And he sets off these charges which blow a hole in the ceiling of the chamber that they're fighting in. And what we realize is that the chamber is underneath the arsenal in applied sciences, and a tumbler falls down. And Bane says, "Thank you very much for your arsenal. We will need it." And he says something like, Bruce gets up again, enraged, and he's punching, and Bane is just kind of sloughing it off like it's nothing. And he says that, "I would wonder what would break first, your soul or your body." He picks Batman up and then slams him down on his knee and drops him on the ground. And Batman's back is basically, in the comics, Bane does this to Batman, but he actually does it he breaks his back. And at this point, we found out later that he knocks out a couple of vertebrae, but pretty much Batman has been taken down. and he swaggers away. Bane has this great swagger, and there'll be more of it in the scenes to come when he emerges, where the whole world can see. He's got this swagger about him when he walks that's very intimidating, and it's like is a man who fears nothing, and he fears no one. He's like contemptuous of all other living, breathing creatures on the planet. It's pretty incredible. There's a moment when he swaggers away and drops a piece of Bruce's cowl like it's an afterthought. It's amazing, amazing, great opening fight scene. It really was. So from that, we cut to the airport, and Selena is trying to get out of town. But before she can get on the plane, she's buttonholed by John Blake. And they arrest her, send her into prison. There's a brief moment between Blake and her where, do you know anything of what happened to Bruce Wayne? He's missing. Do you know if he's still alive? She looks at Blake quite honestly, and she's like, I'm not sure. But that moment, Batman is out of the count, and Bane is free to wreak havoc in Gotham. Batman is now taken to the pit prison, which is where Bane crawled out of, and he's told by Bane what his fate will be in a really cool way. Like as Batman comes to, it's a little blurry, and then Bane's face just fills the screen. And he says, and Batman asks him, how come you haven't killed me yet? And Bane says, I'm going to torture you, but not your body, your soul. And then they go into this thing about that there is no true despair without hope. And he describes the prison that he's in. And in the middle of the prison is this wonderful, they're at the bottom of a well. It's completely open and reminded me of the well he fell in when he was a boy. So I think there's a great thematic unity here, that he has fallen once again. Bane explains to him the nature of despair, which I think is very cool that they play with this in the film, and that there can be no true despair without hope, because as you sit rotting in that prison, you look up and you think, my God, it would be so easy to just climb up. Why can't I just climb up? Why can't I do the simple thing? It's right there. The outflow is right there. Why can't I do it? Driving people crazy after a while. The prisoners have all come to recognize as an impossible jump to get to the last part of this funnel to get out. So very cool, very creepy and horrible, After he leaves, we hear from the other guys that are in there a throwaway line about one person escaped, a child. And the guy says, there's Bane. And the man says, well, it's nothing but a legend, and so on and so forth. I don't know, very cool setup, that Batman is now down, back, busted up in this incredible prison. So now we're cross-cutting to Gotham. Bane interrupts sort of the Wayne board, and he gets 3 board members, and he gets the Dr. Pavel to weaponize this fusion reactor that Wayne has created. At the same time, Gordon finally recognizes the danger to the city beneath, because of some investigation that Blake has done, these permits that were sort of requested by John Daggett's company, and for all this concrete that was poured under the city. And once Gordon figures out what's going on, he tells Foley to send every available cop to smoke Bane out into the underground. Then you have this incredible sequence of sort of the fall of Gotham. The Gotham Rogues is the Gotham City football team, and during the game starts, and we see the mayor is there in his special box, and there's a boy singing the national anthem. When the boy starts to sing it, it kind of makes the other scenes into a montage. We see as he's singing the national anthem, the cops heading down into the belly of the city, Bane slowly climbing up and out, and then into this sort of area that leads from the underground up a ramp into the stadium, and it's sort of like he's ready to emerge onto the world stage. It's very cool. So the mayor at the game, just now when at the kickoff, Bane flips his master switch, and we see from establishing shots that explosions are triggering throughout the city. Most of them are trapping the cops that are underneath the city, but we also see all the bridges are kind of cut by the explosives, and there are big chunks in the middle of each bridge spanning Gotham that fall down. It's an incredible sequence. They were able to really show the isolation of Gotham in all these sequences, and there's a very mournful soundtrack cue. And at the ball game, the mayor's box is completely blown up, so the mayor is killed. A sequence that was in the trailer that one of the Gotham Rogues catches a kickoff, and as he is running behind him, the entire ground of the football field is collapsing down. And when he finally finishes his run, he turns around, and Gotham Stadium is basically now a big hole in the ground. Pretty cool. So then Bane walks up. He takes the microphone from the ref, and they wheel the bomb onto the field. Kind of at the same time, Gordon takes out a hit team that was sent into the hospital to kill him, and Blake arrives soon after, and so they're together. So basically, you have this thing by Bane where he's setting up the idea that all they want to do is give control of the city to Gotham's inhabitants. He kills Dr. Pavel by breaking his neck on television, and then we cut to this federal war room where we hear from them that they definitely have a radiation spike, and that they've positively ID'd Dr. Pavel. Basically, that it's a standoff. That there's nothing really they can do. That, this bomb is really holding the country at bay. And Pavel was the only man to disarm what is described as a 4-megaton neutron bomb. And that there's a mysterious trigger man who is, Bane tells the Gotham citizenry that, one of you holds the trigger, and should anybody attempt to escape, the bomb goes off. Should the feds try to come in, bomb goes off, so on and so forth. So other than that, martial law, the city is theirs. They leave one bridge standing to get supplies into the city. So, and we see one of Bane's men talk to sort of one of the soldiers. The soldier is played by the actor who played a character named Bunny on The Wire. He's a great actor, and I think he's only in this one scene. So there's a great scene where there's a kind of a twist, and he says, how are you going to prevent, millions of people from crossing this bridge? And he's like, I'm not. You are. Because if one person crosses, we blow the bomb. So then the second part of the setup, Bane goes to Blackgate Prison, and he pulls out Gordon's speech that he was going to read at the beginning of the movie, and starts to read and reveals to the world that Batman took the fall for Harvey Dent's crimes, and that Dent actually murdered all these people and threatened to murder Gordon's children. Gordon is sitting in an apartment with Blake, and Blake's kind of really pissed off at him, like, you lied. This whole thing you did is based on a lie. And there's a great speech that Gordon gives. I was there watching Bane on TV, and I'll quote it because I think it's really cool. Quote, "There's a point far out there where the structures fail you, and the rules aren't weapons anymore. They're shackles, letting the bad guy get ahead. One day you may face such a moment of crisis, and when you do, I hope you have a friend like I did to plunge their hands into the filth so that you can keep yours clean." End quote. It's a great quote, and Oldman does a great job. He's tortured by it, obviously, and he's been wanting to tell the truth for years, and now it's been foisted upon him. So now we get kind of a montage of what this control of the city means by Bane. One of the tumblers is in front of Blackgate Prison, and these tumblers are equipped with these big cannons. They blow the door, and they release all the prisoners and arm them. So this is the beginning now of, they try to fold in Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities into this. And I think the storming of Blackgate, to me, is like the storming of the Bastille, which is the French Revolution, obviously. Then we get this montage of sort of the underclasses, if you will, storming the mansions of the rich and pulling them down. We see these rich people being thrown out of their apartments, and their belongings being taken from them, and them becoming homeless. And they convene these hanging courts. The head of the main hanging court is the Scarecrow, played again by Cillian Murphy. And we also see a brief cut where the police, they lower supplies down to the police, for some reason keeping them alive. And I mean, at the end of all this, it's an astonishing bit of editing, really. They have filmed a terrorist takeover of a major metropolitan city, and it's seamless. I mean, the cops are stuck underground. The city will not be invaded from without. No one can leave. There's a bomb. I mean, everything is just set up in like clockwork, and it's done, fairly swiftly within the space of several minutes. And you have this amazing setup that Gotham is now in the hands of Bane and his mercenaries, ostensibly. And we know, the audience knows, I think, and Fox and Miranda Tate obviously know that the whole thing about taking control of your city is a sham, that the bomb is going to explode in about 4 or 5 months. So no matter what happens, we know that Gotham is ashes unless that bomb gets deactivated or removed. Again, amazing. I think Nolan did an incredible job here. They handle so much information, and at the end, you know exactly what has happened and what the stakes are. It's pretty incredible. Now we return back to the pit prison as Wayne attempts to heal his back. One of the guys there is a doctor, and he's sort of directing another man how to help him. And they hang up Wayne by this rope, and the guy tells him, your vertebrae is out in your back. He basically kicks it back in, and the guy says, look, you have to hang here until you can walk, but then, you can start to strengthen yourself again. And then we hear some story about Bane, where, that he was in this prison, and after some, event, he was left scarred and permanently in agony. Some doctor tried to heal him, but botched the job really badly. And so he wears the mask to feed him like an analgesic to keep him without pain. And without that mask, Bane would be in pain perpetually. So they changed the character distinctively from the comics, because in the comics, Bane's mask is a mask, and he has a venom delivery system. And venom is this substance that Bane injects into himself to give him superhuman strength, which allows him to be nearly unstoppable. But in the comics, the venom is delivered to these 4 incisions in the back of his neck, and he has control switches sort of on his forearms. And so when he's about to go into battle, he hits a switch and juices himself up with venom, and he flips out and just goes into battle, and he's nearly unstoppable. They change him up in this film. It's kind of cool. I don't mind it. It's a very odd choice, right? That the mask is to keep him from being in perpetual pain. But anyway, since you've heard me rant about how much I love Bane, I buy it. And it's possible that, Venom, the whole super serum, for Venom, whatever, would just have been an extra layer on this film that would have made it a little more Joel Schumacher-ish, if I may. Part of the story we hear now is that there was once a mercenary, loved the local warlord's daughter, and the warlord didn't want it to happen, so he banished the mercenary to this pit. But all of a sudden, the mercenary was released. Find out that the daughter actually convinced her father to allow her to take the mercenary's place. She was pregnant, had a baby in the prison, and one day in the prison that the mother was killed, and yet the child comes under the wing of a mysterious protector whom we don't, so we don't really know. And up to this point, the filmmakers are pointing us towards that the child is Bane, and we don't have any other reason to discount them. While Bruce is healing, he has this vision of Ra's al Ghul, return visit by actor Liam Neeson. And, we kind of confirm as the viewer that he's the mercenary. I think it's a great way to tie up the series that, at this moment, we think that Bane is his child. And it's a hell of a wrap up that, this film is sort of the return of Ra's al Ghul's legacy to enact vengeance on Bruce Wayne and Gotham, which was denied in the first film. And they just allow the Dark Knight to kind of be what it is. And they fold some of the Dark Knight plot, obviously the live dent, into the new film. And it's a great way to wrap up the film to bring it back to kind of where it started. And eventually Bruce finally stands. So we see him, this for me is very emotional. He's completely helpless. And now he finally is able to stand without a rope. But he is in a lot of pain still. So now we cut to Gotham in the midst of winter. So we gather that some months have passed. We see Selina Kyle kind of, packing up. We don't know where she's going. Tumblers are patrolling the streets. And we just kind of get a montage of, how it looks. And then we cut right back to the pit, and Wayne's starting to do push-ups, which is, the Batman. They're always the in-joke of Batman, right? He doesn't have any superpowers. He's just a guy who does a lot of push-ups. And he's watching the screen. There's this TV screen sort of out where he can't reach it, which is showing nonstop coverage of Gotham. And we get this Rise music playing. Very effective, this music cue, when Bruce, is about to try to climb. So at this point, he tries his first climb, and he gets all the way up to the one place where you have to make this superhumanly far jump, and completely fails. But it's very powerful. They get you set up to kind of how this works. And then at the end, he's told about some child who's made the climb. And we see this montage of this small child who escapes, and the protector is sort of left behind. The child makes the jump. And obviously, we still think the child is Bane. Then we are back at Gotham, and we see that 2 special forces guys from the government have snuck into Gotham City and made contact with Foley and Gordon and what's left of the Gotham City Police Department. And so they all go and make contact with Fox and Miranda Tate. Then they're told about, because at this point Gordon and Foley don't know about the detonation. But right when they all try to leave, the CIA men are assassinated. Gordon is captured. I think Foley escapes. Bane hangs the CIA men from the bridge, and we see it via the federal sort of war room on video. It's really cool, really kind of a creepy way to show it. So now we're back in the pit, and we're getting Bruce's kind of the spiritual aspects of what this jump is. And I find this part very powerful. For me personally, I really think it's an amazing way of putting, notions of spirituality on the screen. He's getting stronger. This guru who's next to him, kind of coaching him through this, says, the jump is not about the body, it's about the soul. And fear is Bruce's problem. Bruce says he's not afraid, he's just angry. So this time he tries, but he fails before he even gets halfway up. Like he doesn't even get to where he got before. Drops back down. And then we get this wonderful jump cut to when he was a kid and his father's coming down on the rope to rescue him. And, obviously the two structures being so similar, it's really, I find it kind of powerful, actually. But the guru now tells him, he finishes what he was trying to tell him before, that it's because he has no fear that he fails, and that fear is a primal power to motivate. And the fact that he lacks this fear, he is lacking a piece of power to get out. He needs fear now as, in a sense, his ally more than ever to get him past this leap. And I think this is kind of cool because, the whole Batman Begins is all about fear and all about him conquering his fear and looking through his fear, walking through his fear and becoming fearless, turning his fear on his enemies, but at first, having to conquer it. And now, in a sense, he needs it back for something. And I think this is kind of clever by the writers. So what the guru is telling him is that in order to get the fear back, he's got to make the climb, but without the rope. So all these guys who go up and attempt this climb tie a rope around their waist in case they fail. The rope allows them to, rope breaks their fall so they don't die. And the guru says that's how the child made the jump. There was no rope on the child. And that in order for him to make that jump, he's going to have to instill fear back in him. Because if he jumps at that height without the rope, he's dead. So now, of course, it's funny. It's the great thing, the magic of cinema. We all know at this point he's going to make it, but it doesn't matter because of the way the film is shot and the way the music comes up and the way everything slowly, rises up to this incredible try that he makes. And you're so with him. It's very powerful. Of course, he makes it. And then you hear a cue from Batman Begins as he kind of steps over the ledge and into this desert. It's a great moment. And you see this incredible old fortress behind him. I'm sure they went and filmed it somewhere out in the old world somewhere, but it's really neat. And he throws a rope behind him, ostensibly to allow the rest of Bane's, prisoners to escape. He's off on his way back to Gotham. So now we cut back to sort of this hangman's court in action, and we see the Scarecrow presiding over the court. And so, the notion is that the accused are guilty, and they choose either exile or death. And of course, it's kind of an in joke because death is exile to the ice and exile is death in the ice. So it's kind of, ha. So then we also get that 18 hours until the bomb goes off. Gordon has his plan to mark the truck with GPS, and he's going to use Miranda Tate to help them mark the correct truck. We also see that Pete Foley has kind of given up. He's gone back home, barricaded himself. He doesn't believe in the bomb timetable. Gordon goes to his house and tries to get him out, and he's like, best thing to just wait this thing out. He doesn't believe in the timetable. Then we see this young boy who steals from a couple of older thugs, saved by Catwoman, and then surprised by Bruce Wayne, who has now returned. So he actually gives her the clean slate program, because she knows he's Batman. And, he says, you got to get me to Fox and get me back in the game. Here's the clean slate. Then we cut back to Gordon with Miranda Tate and Blake and all of them, and they're marking the trucks. And they're all arrested. Of course, Bane has, Ms. Tate taken separately from them, but I think Blake makes it out. So they go to the courts for sentencing. There's this little back and forth about exile or death, and Gordon's like, I choose death. He's like, fine, death by exile. Ha ha. Then we cut back to, actually, Bruce Wayne has been captured as well. They bring him into the area. He briefly meets with Fox and Miranda, and then they're all rescued by Catwoman. So Fox and Wayne return to the hidden Batcave, which he was using through most of the Dark Knight, which is kind of cool. He suits up, and then we cut to Gordon is heading out on the ice with his men, and, to certain doom, haha. Then all of a sudden Batman shows up, and Gordon picks up a flare, and Batman says, light it. He lights his gasoline trail that runs all the way up the bridge, and Batman has stained the upper portion of the bridge in the shape of the bat signal, and it's really cool. We see Foley in his apartment look up and see it. He's kind of inspired by it. And Bane sees it too, and he's kind of, just kind of circles the wagons, and he's kind of shocked. It's a great look, actually. And, it's cinematically, it's great. It's like, yeah, motherfucker, he's back, it works. It just works really well. So Blake is trying to get some cops out of some of their underground traps, and he's discovered by some of Bane's men who kill all the cops that he tried to rescue and are about to kill him. Batman intervenes and then blows up, one of the walls, and all the cops now are free. And so Batman and Blake sort of talk, and he tells Blake, try to get women and children on a bus and over the bridge just in case the main plan fails. But the main plan is Batman and all of the cops in Gotham all out assault on Bane, who I believe is at City Hall. So then Batman and Catwoman meet. He gives her the Bat Pod per their agreement. He said, "I'd like your help, but a deal's a deal." There's a great line here where she realizes what he's about to do, and she says, "You don't owe these people anymore. You've given them everything, you know." And he says, "Not everything, not yet." So they part. And now the climax of the film. We get this march on City Hall, Bane versus Batman, the rematch. We see the cops marching down the street. It's a great shot during the day. We see Foley out in front with his dress uniform. He has redeemed himself. They converge on City Hall. We cut back to Catwoman, who has gone and found a walled-up tunnel and used the Batpod to blow a hole in it, and seems like she's ready to go. So Bane's in City Hall, kind of bored, and tells the men to open fire on the cops. And there's like 3 tumblers there, so the cops are like dead meat. But all of a sudden, the bat drops down and disables the machines, giving the cops a fighting chance. During this, Gordon winds up boarding the truck that Miranda Tate had marked as containing the bomb, but of course it is empty, and we're not sure. Of course, we find out all about her later. And then we also cut to Fox back to where the reactor was originally created, and he's prepping the machine that's there for them to bring it back to, because once they reinsert it back into this thing, they can stop the detonation. And we cut to Blake trying to get these kids out over the bridge. And then we have the City Hall battle, which is pretty cool. They get right to Batman and Bane. Again, I come back to the Rocky III analog, and at this point, Batman fights much smarter. Like in the first fight, like he went straight at Bane 100%. Even Bane remarked, "You fight like a younger man, but futile." And this time, we can see that sort of Bane is missing a lot. And Batman is getting in these shots at his mask because being in the pit, he's learned that the mask is his weak spot. It's a very cool fight, and there's a great scene where they're fighting, and Batman dumps out of the way, and Bane is swinging away like mad, and he's like punching out chunks of masonry from the City Hall pylon. It's really amazing. Like, you really get a sense of how fucking strong Bane is. It's cool because he keeps missing, and Batman keeps just tagging him over and over again, the mask, and eventually he kicks him with the leg that he has as sort of the prosthetic aiding him, and Bane is down. The mask is impaired, so he's in pain, and he's pretty much incapacitated. And it's so satisfying because Bane's sort of just done, and he looks at Batman, and he's just completely overwhelmed, and he's like, "I broke you. How have you come back?" It's a great line, and such a great climax to the film. And the ferocity of Batman, it really just stuns Bane. It's really awesome. And so now we cut back to Gordon and his men are going after the second truck. They're trying to find this bomb because, Batman has told them, like, when we take City Hall, it could be that once the trigger man thinks that we can take the city, they'll just push the button before the bloody thing goes off. And then we have our big twist in the film, which is definitely very divisive for people who like this movie or don't like this movie. Batman is telling Bane, that he escaped from the prison like you, and Bane is like, "I never escaped." From behind, Miranda Tate pulls a knife and stabs Batman in the side, and she's not Miranda Tate, she is Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter. And we get the story retold again, that Talia was the child, Bane was the protector, she made it out. Eventually came back for him with soldiers later and rescued him. This is her plan all along to sort of fulfill her father's destiny. At that point, she also produces the trigger for the bomb, and so we realize that she's the trigger person. And of course, there's this great nail-biting moment. Gordon finally finds the bomb. He drops the device. He gets to the back. It's very Hollywoody. And right just before she pushes the button and is about to destroy Gotham, Gordon has this device that blocks her signal. And she presses the button, nothing happened. And she's like, "Gordon." But she's like, "No matter. He's bought Gotham 11 minutes." The twist. I don't like it. I don't like the twist. I don't think the film needs the twist. I don't think the film needs a Miranda Tate in any of this. Obviously, once the twist happens, you can go back and figure out, because she was involved with all this stuff, how they found the bomb, how they found, the CIA agents, and why they couldn't find the bomb in the right truck the first time through. Obviously, she was thwarting them. This big twist moment. Something about it, the slow knife, because now you have to go back. And to me, the scene that makes this, and it's possible that were this scene out in the movie, the scene where her and Bruce make love in front of the fireplace at his house, that's the scene that doesn't make sense to me when I find out that, she's turned. And obviously she offers to take him away on her plane that night, right? And she would have just taken him to the pit, where Bane would have broken him anyway, right? I'm sure that would have been that's the logic there. But her being this, working for Wayne Enterprises, warming her way in, and of course, her line is, "It's the slow knife, Bruce. The slow knife which cuts the deepest, the knife that waits years." And okay, it's kind of a clever idea, but Bane has been the undisputed heavyweight champ bad guy. I mean, he is just omnipresent, and the film has gotten out of his way, and it's to have him wonderfully beaten by Batman at the end, vanquished in such a satisfying way, and then to have the rug pulled out from under us and say, well, actually, Miranda Tate was running the show. I watched this film. I really love it. It's my second favorite of the trilogy, but it never really works for me. I think it's a contrivance, and maybe they needed it. I don't know. It's not my $2 billion film, right? But I don't like it. Just to finish off the sequence, she leaves because now she has to go find the bomb and either detonate it or make sure that it doesn't get back to where it can be disarmed. And of course, Bane gets up now because she has fixed his mask, and he's like, I must kill you now. And he's got a shotgun. Just as he's about to kill Batman, Catwoman busts through a door on the Batpod and blows him away. And even so, the death of Bane is very unsatisfying. It's kind of, you realize he's been hit squarely with a rocket from the Batpod, and then he's kind of dead off screen. But then, Bane's kind of irrelevant. For the climax of the film, it's about Miranda Tate and getting the bomb out of the film and not about Bane, and it just bothers me. We end quickly, Miranda Tate. Well, then there's this long chase scene where Batman is chasing from above, and Miranda Tate is trying to get in the truck. She finally gets in the truck, and Batman's trying to force the truck towards where the reactor can be disarmed. We find out that Miranda has triggered the flooding, so the bomb actually can't be disarmed. And it's some cool action sequences. Catwoman riding the Batpod destroys, I think, one or two of the tumblers. One of the tumblers has rockets, and so we get this Batpod escaping rockets flying through Gotham City. It's kind of cool. And eventually, the truck itself, hits empty air and crashes down into a lower roadway. Miranda Tate fatally wounded, and they realize, she tells them that I've flooded the spillway. There's nothing that's going to stop this bomb from going off. So Batman immediately, has a farewell kiss with Catwoman, immediately hitches the bomb to the Bat. Gordon's like, you got to tell me who you are. He kind of hints that Batman can be anybody, even a little boy being reminded by a man or putting a coat on your shoulder. I forget the actual line, but then Gordon's like, Bruce Wayne? And of course, the Bat flies out. Great sequence, it flies out over the Gotham Bay, and way far out, we get the detonation safely away from the city, no damage, and it is over. And one little thing during this is that John Blake tried to get these kids across the bridge on the bus. The army winds up blowing the bridge, trapping the children. And it's kind of part of Blake's character arc where he realizes that at this point, the rules were shackles, and because the army wouldn't listen to reason, and there was nothing that he could do personally to save these kids. He's kind of really soured by it. So now we have the end of the trilogy, which is done as kind of a longish montage peppered with short scenes. Gordon, and of course, Batman and the Bat is basically the end of Dickens's Tale of Two Cities, when Sidney Carton takes the place of, I forget the other character, dies in his place. This is Batman, which is clever. So Gordon is reading from the end of Dickens at Bruce Wayne's gravesite at Wayne Manor. Then we see Blake throwing his badge into the river. We see Alfred also in attendance at sort of Wayne's funeral, believing if dead, he's crying, I failed you. Blake quits the force. Gordon is like, can I talk you out of it? And he's like, that place you told me, you were right. I went over that edge and, I can't go back. There's an unveiling of a Batman statue. Bruce's will is read. And once his debts is settled, Alfred gets the contents of the house. But the grounds go to the city to be used as a boys' club. So they kind of wrap up the boys' club plot, which is cool. And then John Blake gets a small package. And this is great. I love this. He's going to pick up the package from like the court person. And she's like, what's your name? And he gives him John Blake. He gets the package. He's like, oh, it's a shame you don't use your given name. It's really nice. He's like, yeah. She's like, okay, Robin. And of course, his name is Robin Blake, and he goes by John. But so I think that's awesome because you know what's coming next. So then we cut to Fox in the armory, sort of in at Wayne Enterprises, and he finds out that Wayne actually repaired the autopilots on the Bat. And it was like they're seeding you to try to buy the end. Blake takes the package given, and we see that it's got like there's a little map with coordinates given, and he's following the directions, and obviously he's now being led to the Batcave. Then we cut to Gordon on the top of Gotham Police Department, burning all the files of Dent and, so on and so forth. Blake enters the Batcave. Then we see, of course, Alfred in Florence, as we knew, right? He gets his Fernie Branca, his drink that he wants to get. Blake walks into the cave holding a light, just the way kind of Bruce did, and he cowers as the bats come at him. Gordon installs a new bat signal on the roof. And then we have the moment where Alfred sees Bruce and Selina Kyle, Selina wearing the pearls. Bruce looks at him, Alfred looks at him. Alfred gets his check and leaves. And then back in the Batcave, there's this structure that rises up out of the water, which kind of holds, whatever. It held the bat, I think, the when it landed. And Blake is standing on it as it rises up. And as it rises past, we go to black and the film ends. And it's, my God, one of the most satisfying endings you can imagine. I mean, I guess I'm a little, it's Hollywood, I guess, right? And you don't kill your superheroes. So, of course, right? I mean, Batman can't die. But part of me thought, like, boy, this would have been really something if they just allowed him to die and they didn't do the whole autopilot thing and allowed him to live at the end. But maybe that would have been unsatisfying, now that I think about it. It's possible that that poor Batman, he sacrificed himself for the city. But, I mean, that's what heroes are supposed to do. The notion of heroes is changing. Back in the ancient Greeks, a hero is someone who died, Heroes died. Heroes don't live happily ever after, usually, I mean, some of them do, I guess, but the majority of them die terribly, and they sacrifice themselves to save people. But whatever, But just to sum up this film and the trilogy, I mean, first, this film, I like it a lot. It's, again, the Nolans have really mastered the short sequence, and there's so many short scenes in this film, and they deliver enormous amounts of plot and information. Again, sacrificing character and performance, because, again, there are no real performances in this film. For me, other than Bane and John Blake. Catwoman, she gets some scenes, and she's able to sort of, do some things. Bane is a performance all his own because of, what Hardy's encrusted with. I think the whole thing is a full-fledged performance, physically, vocally. So that's a performance. And Blake gets some nice scenes. And I think he's probably given one of the meatiest characters in the film. Bale's performance really ended at the end of Batman Begins. In the latter two films, he's Batman. He carries the plot. He has his pithy lines, and we follow him. But there's not much. We know who Batman is, really. I really like Dark Knight Rises, and the trilogy as a whole. I mean, I feel about this trilogy the way I feel about the Lord of the Rings. That it will be unmatched for decades, if ever. Frankly, I mean, I think these films really are like, to me, the apex of bringing a superhero to the screen in a way that can be cinematically powerful and not overly cartoony. Like, of course, you can rip these films apart in terms of, oh my God, that's so fake, that would never work. How did that happen, right? But there is a sheen of grittiness and attention to detail in all these films that puts it, to me, they're different. Avengers and Hulk and Spider-Man and these films, like, they're good in their own right. They, to me, they're more comic book films because they're a lot more fake in a sense that, the Nolan Batman films they go a little deeper. They get a little grittier. They play with some dark themes, They kill Rachel Dawes in the middle film. She does not come back to life in some, Marvel Comics-like type of thing. Like, I forget the agent who was killed in the Avengers movie, came back for the TV show. There's none of that in the Nolan films. You die, you're dead. It's nice. It's very anti-comics because, comics are not standalone things unless comics are written that way in limited series, so on and so forth. So that ends The Dark Knight Rises and ends the 3-part series on Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. I want to thank you for listening. Again, my name is Jeff Palermo. This has been Sci-Fi On Screen. You can find us online at sci-fionscreen.com. We're on Facebook. You can search for Sci-Fi On Screen. Or on iTunes, and you can search for us in any podcast app on any smartphone. You will find Sci-Fi On Screen. You can subscribe. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.